The table was set for 4, but for Elena Carter, it felt like a stage set for 1. At 65, she had reserved the best table at the Oakwood Grill, a place her children had always considered the pinnacle of fine dining in their suburban Massachusetts town. The candlelight danced across the polished silverware, casting a warm, deceptive glow on the empty chairs beside her. They were chairs meant for her 3 children, her greatest triumphs. Ethan, the firstborn, a tech CEO with a company name that appeared in Forbes. Olivia, the middle child, a celebrated architect whose designs were the talk of Boston. And Ava, the baby of the family, a fashion designer whose boutique was featured in Vogue. Elena had built her life around them, brick by selfless brick. Tonight, she expected to see the foundation of that life gathered here, celebrating not just her birthday, but the love that had held them all together. She had arrived a half-hour early, her heart thrumming with a nervous, joyful energy. The maitre d', a kind, elderly man named Richard, had greeted her warmly, a subtle knowing look in his eyes. He knew Elena. He knew her family. He had watched her bring her children here for birthdays and graduations, the table always buzzing with laughter. Today, the only sound was the soft clinking of glasses from a nearby table. Her phone vibrated in her hand, and she clutched it like a lifeline. It was a text from Ava. The words were small, but their impact was a punch to the gut. "So sorry, Mom. The new collection is dropping early and I'm swamped. Sending you so much love. Happy B-Day." A single heart emoji was added, like a flimsy bandage on a deep wound. Elena read it twice, the bright, cheerful words mocking the silence around her. Ava had always been the most expressive, the one who painted their mother in her drawings as a queen with a crown of light. Now, her apologies felt like a performance. Elena put the phone down, her hand trembling slightly. She ordered a glass of water and tried to steady her breathing. The logical part of her brain said, "It's just a busy time. They are successful. This is what you wanted for them." But her heart, the part that had sacrificed a promising career in interior design to be a full-time mother, whispered something else they forgot. A few minutes later, another message came through, this time from Olivia. Her message was more formal, more succinct, just like her. "Mother, I'm so sorry. I'm stuck in a last-minute pitch meeting for the new City Hall project. This is a huge deal. Please forgive me. We'll celebrate properly next week." No emoji, no heartfelt plea, just a matter-of-fact excuse as if her absence were a business transaction, a necessary loss for a larger gain. Elena felt a bitter taste on her tongue. Olivia's proper celebration felt like a delayed payment on a debt that would never be settled. Elena looked at the 2 empty chairs, their polished wood glinting under the lights. She thought of all the times she had sat in those chairs, helping them with homework late at night, whispering away their fears, cheering them on from the sidelines of countless soccer games and school plays. Her life had been a series of sacrifices, each one made willingly, a stone laid to build a bridge for them to cross. And now they were on the other side, and the bridge was no longer needed. She was just considering calling the restaurant staff to see if she could change the reservation to a smaller table, a final, painful admission of her aloneness when her phone rang. It was Ethan. Her oldest, the one she had always considered the most responsible, the most grounded. He was the one who would show up, she told herself. He wouldn't let her down. She answered with a faint, hopeful tremor in her voice. "Ethan, honey, where are you? Everything okay?" she asked, a small smile forming on her lips. His voice on the other end of the line was crisp, and though he tried to soften it, the edge of frustration was clear. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I won't make it either. There's a major server issue at the office, and I have to oversee the fix myself. It's $1 million problem if we don't handle it now." He rattled off technical jargon she didn't understand, the words creating a wall between them. Elinor's heart sank. She pictured him in his sleek office tower, his face illuminated by the cold glow of a computer screen, a world away from the candlelight of her table. "Oh," she managed to say, the single syllable a universe of disappointment. "I understand. I really wanted us all to be together." There was a moment of awkward silence. He cleared his throat. "Look, Mom, I know, and I feel awful. This is just a bigger priority right now. We have to be on top of our game. It's not something I can just delegate. You understand, right? I mean, these are the fruits of my labor, the important stuff." The phrase, "the important stuff," hung in the air, a cruel echo. It was a mirror reflecting her deepest fear. In their world of business and profit, the time spent with their mother, the woman who had given up her own dreams to make theirs possible, was no longer important. It was an afterthought, a lower priority item on a jam-packed schedule. Then, the final, unforgivable blow. "Listen," he said, his voice dropping to a hurried, businesslike tone. "I've already wired you some money. Take it and go get yourself something nice. A gift from all of us." The words landed like a physical blow, a cash transaction, a way to buy his way out of a moment he couldn't afford to give. It was a cold, calculated substitute for his presence, a tangible insult to the love she had so freely given. He was offering a check in exchange for her silence, for her loneliness. Elinor slowly hung up the phone. She looked at the perfectly set table, the 3 empty chairs, and the flickering candlelight. A tear, hot and heavy, finally broke free, tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't just a tear of sadness. It was a tear of recognition. She had spent her life laying bricks for her children's bridges, but tonight she realized something horrifying. She had been left standing on the wrong side, the bridge behind her, now a chasm she could not cross, and the money they had thrown at her felt less like a gift and more like a payment to keep her there. The unspoken debt, she realized, was not theirs to pay. It was hers to carry alone. The tear had dried on Elinor's cheek, but the cold feeling remained, a deep and spreading numbness. She paid for her untouched meal, leaving a generous tip, a small, ingrained act of kindness that felt strangely out of place tonight. The maitre d', Richard, watched her go with a look of quiet sympathy. He didn't need to ask what was wrong. The single table for 4 spoke volumes. She walked out of the Oakwood Grill and into the chill of the late evening, a woman who felt like an empty house, echoing with the ghosts of a family that had moved on. She didn't drive home. Instead, she found herself walking, her feet carrying her without conscious thought. They led her past familiar landmarks, each one a monument to a sacrifice. She passed the old library, and a memory, as vivid as a photograph, bloomed in her mind. It was 1993. Ethan was 10, and Olivia was 5. Elinor, a woman in her late 30s, sat at a large oak table, her head bent over a towering stack of architecture and design books. She was putting the finishing touches on a portfolio that would land her a junior partnership at a prestigious Boston firm. The deal was all but sealed. She just needed to ace the final presentation. But tonight, a more urgent matter demanded her attention: Ethan's science fair project. He had to build a solar system model. She had worked all week, sneaking in time after the kids were in bed, the smell of paint and glue mixing with the aroma of coffee. But now it was 10 p.m. and he was still struggling with the planet's orbits. He looked up at her, his eyes heavy with sleep and frustration. "Mom, I just don't get it," he said, his voice small. Elinor closed her portfolio, her pencil still poised over a delicate sketch. She pushed aside the architectural blueprints and spent the next 3 hours, until the sun began to rise, meticulously helping him string styrofoam planets on wire hangers, making sure each orbit was just right. The next morning, she presented a flawless solar system model at the school, not her architectural portfolio at the firm. The partnership offer went to someone else. She told herself it was worth it. The look of triumph on Ethan's face, a look she would chase for years, was her real masterpiece. Her steps took her past the park, and another memory surfaced, tinged with the sweet scent of fresh-cut grass and childhood innocence. It was 2002. Ava, the last one, was a wisp of a child, 5 years old, with an imagination as vast as the sky. Elinor, ever the architect of her children's dreams, was helping Ava build a magnificent sandcastle, complete with moats and towers. Her phone rang. It was her old boss from the design firm, offering her a freelance project. A big one. It would mean a steady income and, more importantly, a chance to get back in the game she had so loved. But the project would require her to travel, to be away from the children. She looked down at Ava, whose tiny hands were molding the sand with such focus and delight. Ava looked up, a smudge of dirt on her nose, and said, "Mom, can we build a tower that reaches the clouds?" Elinor smiled, her heart swelling with a warmth that money could never buy. She politely declined the offer, promising to call back sometime soon. That sometime soon never came. She had chosen to build castles in the sand with her daughter over building high-rises with her colleagues. It was the correct decision, she knew. How could a building ever feel as important as a little girl's laughter? The path led her to the entrance of their old neighborhood, the one she had sold a year ago to downsize. She stared at the house, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky, and remembered the debt she had paid in full long before they had sent her a wire transfer. She remembered the nights she had lain awake, worrying about tuition fees and college applications. She had taken on part-time jobs, tutored students, and sold off her own cherished antiques, all to ensure their futures were paved with gold. She never bought herself a new suit, never went on a vacation, never treated herself to anything more than a new book. Every penny was for them, for Ethan's business school, for Olivia's architecture program, for Ava's art school. She was a financial architect, meticulously building their portfolios while her own lay gathering dust. She had told them it was her joy, her privilege. She had worn her sacrifices like a badge of honor, but she had never called it a debt. She had simply believed that love, given so freely and completely, would be returned. It was a silent contract, an unspoken agreement. She gave them her youth, her ambition, her potential, and in return, she expected their time, their affection, and their presence. The memory of Ethan's voice echoed in her head. "It's $1 million problem if we don't handle it now. These are the fruits of my labor." The fruits of his labor, the fruits of her labor, too. His success, Olivia's fame, Ava's triumphs, they were all built on the foundation of her unseen and unacknowledged work. She was the mortar holding the bricks together, the invisible force that had lifted them so high. Elinor turned away from the house, a hollow ache in her chest. She had paid her debt to them. She had given every piece of herself. But tonight, as she stood alone under the vast, indifferent sky, she realized something profound and heartbreaking. They weren't just forgetting her sacrifices, they were forgetting her. They no longer saw the woman who had built their world. They only saw a source of money, a past to be acknowledged with a hurried text message, a person who could be bought with a simple wire transfer. The unspoken debt wasn't hers to carry anymore. It was theirs to acknowledge, but it was a debt they had chosen to ignore, and a choice she now knew she could no longer live with. The night air was a sharp, biting cold, but for Elinor it was a welcome sensation. It was real. It was tangible. Unlike the polite, manufactured warmth of the restaurant or the hollow affection of her children's texts. The realization she'd had outside her old house felt less like a heartbreak and more like a final, clarifying truth. She wasn't just a mother to them anymore. She was an obligation, an item on a checklist, a debt to be paid with a cold wire transfer. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had hardened into a new resolve. She wasn't going to stand on the wrong side of the bridge and wait. She was going to walk across and knock on their door. First, she would visit Ethan. He was the oldest, the one who had set the tone. She remembered the boy who had once held her hand so tightly at the doctor's office, terrified of a simple shot. Now, he managed a company worth millions, yet he couldn't manage to show up for a birthday dinner. She would go to his domain, the gleaming glass tower that housed his success, and she would ask him not for money, but for a moment of truth. The next morning, Alina dressed in the nicest suit she still owned. A classic navy blazer she had bought years ago, a piece of clothing that felt like a relic from her past, a time when she was a professional, not just a mother. She took the bus into the city, her heart beating a nervous rhythm against her ribs. The bus was filled with young professionals, all with headphones on, lost in their own worlds. They were Ethan's generation. Driven, focused, they moved through the world with an effortless efficiency that made her feel like a ghost. When she arrived at Ethan's office building, the lobby was a cathedral of polished marble and stark white light. A young, impeccably dressed woman sat behind a massive desk. "I'm here to see Ethan Carter," Alina said, her voice a little shaky. "He's my son." The receptionist's face, a mask of practiced politeness, didn't change. She typed on a computer, her fingers flying across the keys. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" Alina felt a jolt of shock. An appointment? With her own son? "No, I'm his mother," she repeated, as if this fact should carry weight in this cold, corporate space. The receptionist gave her a pitying smile. "He's in a meeting. He's got a very busy schedule today." A wave of frustration washed over Alina. This was a wall, a human shield. She pushed past the lump in her throat. "Please," she said, her voice firming. "Just tell him his mother, Alina, is here." After a prolonged, uncomfortable moment, the receptionist finally picked up the phone. Alina watched her speak in hushed tones, her eyes flicking towards her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. Then she hung up and sighed. "Mr. Carter can see you for 5 minutes," she said, her voice clipped. "He's between meetings. Take the elevator to the 30th floor." Alina felt a knot tighten in her stomach. 5 minutes, as if she were a salesman trying to pitch a product. She rode the elevator up, the numbers blinking like a countdown to her own disappointment. Ethan's office was a monument to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he had conquered. His desk was a slab of dark wood, minimalist and clean. He stood as she entered, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a business smile, a flash of teeth and a subtle nod. He gestured to a leather chair, but he didn't move to hug her. "Mom," he said, his voice a little strained. "This is a surprise. I'm really in the middle of something big here. A launch in 2 hours." Alina's heart ached. The last time she saw him, they had hugged, a quick, almost awkward embrace at Christmas. Now, even that seemed out of reach. She sat down, clutching her purse in her lap. "I know you're busy, Ethan," she began, her voice soft. "But I came because I'm not okay. Your message last night. I was so hurt and so lonely, I just want to understand." Ethan's face hardened. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from his childhood. "Mom, we talked about this. I had a huge project. This company isn't just a hobby. It's my life, it's my future. You always taught us to work hard to be successful. That's what I'm doing." "I know," Alina said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, but does success mean you have to forget about your family, about the people who helped you get here?" "Forget?" He scoffed, his voice rising slightly. "I sent you money, Mom. I put you on a monthly retainer. You don't have to worry about anything. I've taken care of my responsibility. What more do you want from me?" The words responsibility and retainer hit her like a physical blow. Her love, her decades of sacrifice, had been reduced to a monthly payment. He saw himself as a dutiful son who had fulfilled his part of a transaction. "I don't want your money, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want you, your time, your presence. I want you to remember all the things I did for you, all the things I gave up so you could have this." She gestured to the sprawling office, the view of the city. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his voice dropping to a low, frustrated growl. "Mom, please don't do this. Don't guilt-trip me. I'm a grown man. I am where I am because of my own hard work. I know you helped, but that was your job. That's what parents do. They raise their kids, and I'm paying you back. I've fulfilled my end of the bargain. I've done everything I'm supposed to do." He had said it, the unspoken contract now voiced, and it was a cold, transactional deal. He had done his part. He had paid his due. There was no room for love, for memory, for an actual human connection. Elinor looked at her son, this stranger in a custom-made suit, and felt a profound sense of loss. He wasn't the boy who needed her anymore. He was a man who had forgotten he ever did. "Is that all?" he asked, looking past her to the clock on the wall. "Because I really do have to get back to this." Elinor stood up slowly, her body feeling heavy and old. She looked at the man who was her son, a man she had raised and loved with every fiber of her being, and she knew there was nothing left to say. The conversation she had hoped for was a fantasy. This cold, hard truth was all she was going to get. She turned and walked out, the closing of his office door a final, definitive sound, leaving her alone in the cold, white world he had built, a world with no room for her. Elinor walked out of Ethan's tower, the heavy glass door closing with a final, echoing thud. The cold air didn't register. Her mind was a whirlwind of his words: responsibility, retainer, my job. He had turned their relationship into a business contract, and in that moment she felt less like a mother and more like a vendor. She had given him her whole life, and he had sent her a check. The logic was so clean, so heartless, it was terrifying. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "Just saw your new profile pic, Mom. You look great. Hope you're having the best birthday week." The text was a brightly colored bandage over a gaping wound, a digital pat on the head from a world away. Elinor put the phone back in her purse. She couldn't deal with the surface-level affection, the carefully curated illusion of care, not after the raw, unvarnished truth she'd just been handed. She needed to see Olivia. Olivia was different. Olivia, the architect, built things not just for profit, but for beauty, for the human experience. Surely she would understand. Elinor hailed a taxi, giving the driver the address to Olivia's firm. The office was in an older, brick building downtown, its interior a testament to Olivia's minimalist aesthetic. Everything was white, clean, and sparse. The only personal touch was a black-and-white photograph of a towering skyscraper, its windows reflecting the clouds. Elinor's reflection was a small, insignificant figure in one of the panes. Olivia looked up from her enormous drafting table, a half-smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wore a tailored black dress, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. The young girl who used to build intricate forts out of bed sheets and pillows was gone, replaced by this poised, professional woman. "Mom," Olivia said, her voice a little breathless. "What a surprise. I'm literally in the middle of a schematic review. This is for the new art museum. It's on a tight deadline." She didn't stand, just gestured to a small stool with a stack of blueprints on it. Elinor sat, feeling like an interruption. "I know you're busy, honey. I was in the city and I thought I'd stop by. I tried to see Ethan, but he was in a hurry, too." Olivia's expression tightened ever so slightly. "Well, yeah, Mom. Ethan's business is on a whole other level. He's a CEO. We all have our professional commitments. This is what you raised us for, isn't it? To be successful." Elinor's heart sank. She heard Ethan's words in her daughter's mouth. "Yes," she whispered, "but I raised you to be good people, too. I raised you to remember where you came from, to remember each other." Olivia sighed and pushed her reading glasses up onto her forehead. "Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry I missed dinner, but my life doesn't stop for a single event. It's a continuous, moving machine. I have to be in it every day, all day." She looked at a stack of papers on her desk, as if they were a more interesting conversation partner. Look, I know you're lonely. That's what this is about, isn't it? The bluntness of the question was a shock. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. It's not just loneliness, Olivia. It's about feeling like all the years I gave you were just a phase. Like I was a stepping stone, and now that you've crossed, you don't even look back. Olivia met her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, Eleanor saw a flicker of her little girl's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by the guarded, rational look of a CEO. Mom, that's not fair. We love you. We talk to you on the phone. We send you money every month. She paused as if she were tallying a ledger. We paid for you to get a new car last year. We bought you a new television. We've done everything we can. Everything they could, as if her worth could be bought in a series of transactions. I don't need things, Olivia, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. I need my family. I need your time. I need to feel like I'm still a part of your lives. Olivia leaned back, her face a picture of exasperated patience. She was now in full problem-solving mode, seeing her mother's plea as a design flaw to be fixed. Then you need to find something for yourself, Mom. You need a hobby, a new group of friends. You should join a book club or start a class. Dad's been gone for 10 years. You have to learn to be independent. You have to find a new purpose. Our lives can't be your purpose anymore. The words landed not as a suggestion, but as a final, cruel verdict. Our lives can't be your purpose anymore. It was the quietest, most brutal rejection yet. Her children had taken everything she had to give: her time, her dreams, her life's purpose, and now they were giving it back to her as if it were a worn-out coat. They were telling her to start over, but they had left her with nothing to build with. Eleanor stood up, feeling a cold, unfamiliar resolve begin to form. The pain was still there, but it was no longer a fresh wound. It was hardening, turning into something strong and resilient. She looked at her daughter, at the beautiful, sterile world Olivia had built, and knew there was no room for her here. There were no chairs at the drafting table for a mother. "You're right, Olivia," Eleanor said, her voice clear and steady. "Our lives can't be my purpose anymore." She turned and walked away, not waiting to see if her daughter had anything to add. As she stepped out of the office and onto the street, Eleanor felt the last vestiges of her old life falling away. She had faced her son, and he had given her a check. She had faced her daughter, and she had given her a piece of advice. In both cases, they had treated her not as a person, but as a problem to be solved, a box to be checked. She had laid the foundation for their lives, and now they were telling her to go build her own on nothing but air. The pain of being forgotten had been immense, but it was being replaced by something else. A quiet, burning fire. A need for a new plan, a new purpose, and a new life that had nothing to do with them. Eleanor walked aimlessly, the city's noise a buzzing static in her ears. She was a ghost in a world of moving, living people, each of them with a destination. She had no destination. Her purpose had been a single-lane road, and now she had reached the end of it. Ethan had treated her like a vendor, a past transaction. Olivia had treated her like a problem to be solved, a project to be outsourced. They were two different kinds of rejections, but they had the same effect. They had left her with nothing. Her feet, as if guided by an old, familiar muscle memory, took her to a small city park. It was an oasis of green and quiet amidst the concrete and chaos. This was a place of 1,000 memories. She had sat on this very bench, watching Ethan take his first tentative steps, his small hand wrapped around her finger. She had read storybooks to Olivia beneath the sprawling oak tree, her daughter's imagination soaring with every word. And she had chased Ava through these very paths, their laughter echoing a decade and a half ago, a sound that now felt impossibly far away. She sat on a bench, a cold slab of stone against her back. The late afternoon sun was a pale wash of light, and the air was growing cooler. She watched a young mother playing with her son, a familiar, joyful scene that felt like it was happening in a different lifetime. The boy's face was bright with laughter, and his mother's smile was genuine, untroubled. It was a mirror of what she had been, and it was a painful reflection of what she had lost. A lump formed in her throat, thick and impossible to swallow. The grief was no longer a sharp, piercing pain. It was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She had tried to reach them, to build a bridge across the chasm of their indifference, but they had refused to meet her halfway. They had instead chosen to stay on their side, waving from the shore, believing their monthly checks and polite texts were enough. Tears, hot and stinging, finally broke free and rolled down her cheeks. They weren't just for the hurt of the past 2 days. They were for a lifetime of unacknowledged sacrifice. They were for the woman she could have been, the career she had given up, the dreams she had put on a shelf to gather dust. She cried for the mother who had given her all, only to be left with nothing. "Elinor, is that you?" A voice, soft and familiar, cut through her reverie. She looked up, her vision blurred by tears. Standing there was Sarah, an old friend from her early interior design days. Sarah was a widow too, but unlike Elinor, she had no children. She had built a successful career and was now living a vibrant, independent life. Sarah's face, lined with her own history, was a picture of genuine concern. She sat beside Elinor, not saying a word, just taking her hand. Her hand was warm, a stark contrast to the coldness Elinor had been feeling for days. "What is it, Elle?" Sarah asked gently, her voice like a warm blanket. "I know that look. It's the look of a person who has given all she has and has no more to give." Elinor couldn't speak at first. She just shook her head, the tears still falling. Finally, she managed to get the words out, a choked-up torrent of frustration and pain. She told Sarah everything: the birthday dinner, the cold rejection from Ethan, the dismissive advice from Olivia. Sarah listened patiently, her expression never wavering. When Elinor finished, a quiet settled between them, broken only by the chirping of a few sparrows. "Oh, Elinor," Sarah said, her voice filled with a profound sorrow. "I'm so sorry. They're blind. They're so busy building their own empires they can't see the woman who built them. But listen to me. This isn't your fault." "It feels like it is," Elinor whispered. "I feel like I failed somehow, like I taught them the wrong thing, that their love is conditional, based on what I can give them. Now that they are independent, I have no purpose anymore." Sarah squeezed her hand, her gaze steady and firm. "You didn't fail, Elinor. You loved them completely. You gave them a foundation of love that most people can only dream of. But here's the thing about foundations. They are meant to be built upon, not to hold you prisoner. You don't have a purpose, Elinor. Your purpose was a mother. It was the most important job in the world. But that season of your life is over. They told you so themselves. They told you their lives can't be your purpose anymore." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And you know what? They're right. Now it's time to find a new one for you." Sarah's words were a revelation. They were a truth Elinor had been running from, a truth her children had uttered so coldly. But coming from Sarah, they sounded not like a rejection, but like a liberation. It was a permission slip to stop waiting, to stop hoping, to stop being a mother in a world where her children no longer needed one. "You have to let them go, Elinor," Sarah said softly. "They are adults. You did your job. Now it's time to live your life. For you, all those dreams you put on the shelf, it's time to dust them off. It's time to remember who you were before you were a mother. Before you were Elinor Carter, Mom, you were Elinor, an artist, a designer, a person with her own dreams." Elinor looked at her friend, at the deep sincerity in her eyes. Sarah had no one. Her life was her own. It was a blank canvas, and she painted it with bright, vibrant colors. Elinor's canvas felt stained and torn, but for the first time in years, she felt a small, fierce spark within her, a desire not just to survive, but to live. The sadness was still there, a ghost that would likely never leave, but it was no longer a crippling weight. It was a fuel, A cold, hard fact. Her children had moved on. They had told her to find her own purpose. And for the first time, Alina decided she would listen to them. She would stop being the mother who waited and start being the woman who lived. She stood up, a new kind of strength in her posture. "Thank you, Sarah," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Alina returned home with a new sense of purpose, a quiet, steel resolve. The despair was gone, replaced by a clarity she hadn't felt in decades. Her children had unknowingly given her a gift by telling her she was no longer needed. She had a plan, and it was a simple one, to take back her life. The first step was to inform them of her decision. She wouldn't ask for their blessing, she would simply tell them. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration. She spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity, the long-dormant professional in her reawakening. She made phone calls, spoke to real estate agents, and even opened a new bank account. Her old home, filled with the ghosts of a family that no longer existed, felt like a cage. Selling it wasn't just a financial decision, it was a psychological one. It was an act of liberation. She scheduled a dinner with all 3 children, using a group text message, the same cold, modern method they used to communicate with her. "Dinner at my place this Friday, 7 p.m. Please be there. I have something important to discuss." The replies were swift and predictable. Ethan with a simple "okay." Olivia with a slightly more verbose "sure, Mom, see you then." And Ava with a string of emojis that felt hollow in their cheerfulness. Friday arrived and the house felt different. It was cleaner, more organized, as if Alina's new mental clarity had manifested in her physical surroundings. When the doorbell rang, it was Ethan. He was the first to arrive, as always. He gave her a perfunctory peck on the cheek and settled onto the sofa, pulling out his phone. He looked around the room, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Place looks nice, Mom. Are you redecorating?" "Something like that," she said, a small, knowing smile on her lips. Next came Olivia, followed by Ava. They gave her quick, hurried hugs, a rehearsed dance of filial duty. They sat, a neat little row of expensive clothes and successful careers, all of them looking slightly on edge. They were used to being in control, to dictating the terms of their meetings. The silence in the room was heavy and unfamiliar. "So, what's up, Mom?" Ava asked, breaking the tension. "You sound so mysterious on the text." Alina took a deep breath. She looked at the 3 faces that she had loved and nurtured her whole life. They were beautiful, successful, and completely oblivious. The moment was surreal, as if she were a character in her own story, watching from a distance. "I asked you all here because I have a few things to tell you," she began, her voice steady. "First, I've sold the house." The news landed like a grenade in the quiet room. All 3 of them looked at her in stunned silence. Ethan was the first to speak. "Sold the house? Mom, are you serious? Why, you didn't even talk to us about it. This is a huge decision. Where are you going to live?" His voice was a blend of shock and thinly veiled frustration. "I am perfectly capable of making my own decisions, Ethan," Alina said calmly. "And I'm not going to live anywhere for a while. I'm going to travel." Olivia's eyes widened. "Travel? Mom, what are you talking about? You've never traveled by yourself. Where would you even go?" "Everywhere," Alina replied, the word tasting like a beautiful, forbidden fruit. "I'm going to Paris. Then I'll see Italy. I might even go to Asia. There's a whole world out there I haven't seen, and I plan to see it all." Ava was the next to chime in, her voice a mix of confusion and alarm. "But what about us? What about the money you're going to use? What about the inheritance?" The word hung in the air, cold and calculating. There it was, the real concern, not her safety, not her happiness, but the money. The unspoken debt was now a spoken, financial one. "The money is for me, Ava," Alina said, her voice dropping to a low, firm tone. "It's for my new life. And since you're all so busy with your important projects, and since I'm so independent, I'm going to take a page from your book. I won't be needing your monthly payments anymore. You can keep your money." The room went dead silent. The air crackled with a tension that was almost unbearable. They had used money as a substitute for love, as a way to control her and keep her at a comfortable distance. Now she was turning their own weapon against them. "This is insane," Ethan said, his face a mask of disbelief. "You're acting crazy, Mom. You're just giving away all of your savings. You could get sick. What about your future? You're being completely irresponsible." Irresponsible? Elinor's voice, though still quiet, was filled with a powerful, burning emotion. "You think I'm being irresponsible, after a lifetime of being nothing but responsible. I gave up my career, my dreams, and my youth to raise you. I worked 2 part-time jobs and saved every penny so that you could go to the best schools, start your own businesses, and have the lives you have today. You told me I was a burden. You told me to find a purpose. Well, I have. My purpose is to live. My purpose is to finally, after all these years, be myself." She looked at each of them, her gaze unwavering. "And I will not ask for your permission. I will not seek your approval. You had your chance to be a family, but you were too busy. So now I'm going to live my life and you can live yours." Elinor stood up, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. The 3 of them sat frozen on the couch, the full weight of her words sinking in. They had thought they had all the power, all the control, but they had forgotten one thing. She was the one who held the key to the cage. And tonight, she had finally set herself free. Elinor's declaration hung in the air long after she had left the room. She had walked out, leaving the 3 of them, Ethan, Olivia, and Ava, in a state of stunned disbelief. The carefully constructed world they had built, one where their mother was a reliable, passive figure to be managed from a distance, had just been shattered. They sat in silence for a long moment, the shock slowly giving way to a rising tide of fear and anger. Ethan, the first to recover, slammed his fist on the coffee table. "What is she doing? This is insane. She's going to blow through all of her money and then what? Who is going to take care of her?" His voice was laced with a frustration that had less to do with his mother's well-being and more with the disruption of his own life. The financial obligation, the one he had so proudly fulfilled, was suddenly gone, replaced by a much larger, more unpredictable problem. "She's completely lost it," Olivia said, her face pale. "Talking about traveling the world? She's never been anywhere. She's going to get swindled, or she'll get sick. We have to do something." Olivia wasn't worried about Elinor's happiness. She was worried about the messy, uncontrollable situation her mother was creating. It was a problem that couldn't be solved with a schedule or a perfectly designed solution. Ava, the youngest, sat with her head in her hands. "This is a nightmare. What if she runs out of money and then she expects us to bail her out? I can't afford that right now. I have my own loans and my own business to run." Her fear was the most honest of the 3, a fear of her own financial security being compromised. The money Elinor was spending was, in Ava's mind, money that was rightfully hers one day. Their fear quickly morphed into a desperate, panic strategy session. They had to stop her. They had to regain control. "We need to get her to sign over power of attorney," Ethan said, a cold, calculated look in his eyes. "We'll convince her it's for her own protection, that we're just making sure her affairs are in order before she travels." "She'll never agree," Olivia countered, shaking her head. "Not after what she said. We need a different approach. What if we talk to a lawyer, see if we can get a conservatorship, claim she's mentally unstable? Selling her house and acting so erratically. That's a perfect case for an old woman with cognitive decline." The idea hung in the air, a venomous, alluring option. It was a total betrayal, a cold-blooded act of aggression against the woman who had sacrificed everything for them. But to them, it felt like the only way to restore order. It was a business decision, a way to mitigate a major risk. "We don't have to go that far," Ava said, her voice small. "Maybe we can just keep a closer eye on her, see what she's doing, get an idea of her plans. Ethan and Olivia dismissed her idea immediately. That's not enough. Ethan snapped. We need to take control. This isn't just about a few trips. This is about everything, about what she's going to do with the rest of her life. He looked at his siblings, his voice dropping to a serious, conspiratorial whisper. We can't let her go on this spiritual journey and blow our inheritance. We worked too hard for this. We deserve this. The phrase, "we deserve this," was the final piece of their twisted logic. In their minds, they were not the villains, they were the victims. Eleanor's life was an extension of their own, and her sudden independence was a theft of what they believed they were owed. They saw her not as a person, but as a misguided asset that needed to be managed and protected from itself. They made a plan. Ethan would contact a lawyer specializing in elder affairs. Olivia would discreetly try to gather information from family friends, looking for any evidence of unstable behavior. Ava would try to text her mother, feigning affection, to gather more details about the sale of the house and her travel plans. They worked together with an efficiency they had never shown when dealing with their mother's emotional needs. The gears of their conspiracy began to turn, a dark and insidious plot to strip Eleanor of her newfound freedom and return her to the box they had so carefully built for her. They were no longer children simply ignoring their mother. They were now actively working to take her freedom and her future away. Eleanor awoke the next morning feeling lighter than she had in years. The air in the house, once heavy with the weight of unfulfilled expectations, now felt clean and full of possibility. She ignored the influx of text messages from her children, each one a thinly veiled attempt to pry into her plans. Ava asked if she had started packing. Olivia sent a link to a blog post about senior citizen scams. Ethan simply demanded to know the name of her real estate agent. She replied to none of them. Their anxiety was not her concern. Her future was. Her first act of liberation was physical. She packed up the old photo albums, the dusty awards from her children's school years, and the framed portraits of them as a perfect family. She didn't throw them away. She simply put them in boxes, tucking them neatly into the back of a closet. They were a part of her past, but they were no longer a part of her present. Instead of focusing on the past, she began to build her future. She called a travel agent and booked a flight to Paris, a city she had always dreamed of visiting. She enrolled in a painting class at the local community center, a hobby she had abandoned in her 30s. And on a whim, she went to a yoga studio that had opened down the street. It was there that she met Sarah again, the friend who had been the catalyst for her change. Sarah was in a class with a group of other women in their 60s and 70s. They were a diverse, vibrant mix, a retired teacher, a former journalist, a grandmother who had just started a pottery business. They were all living their second acts with a quiet, joyful determination. Eleanor was nervous at first. She was used to being Ethan's mom or Olivia's mom, and she had forgotten how to introduce herself as just Eleanor. But these women didn't care about her children's careers or her financial status. They cared about the woman in the yoga class who was trying to touch her toes for the first time in 20 years. "Good job, Eleanor," a woman named Joyce, the former teacher, said warmly as Eleanor wobbled through a pose. "It's all about practice, not perfection." After class, they all went out for coffee. The conversation was exhilarating. They talked about books they had read, places they had been, and dreams they still held. They laughed about a friend who had started dating a much younger man and commiserated about a different friend's recent knee surgery. They weren't a family by blood, but they were a family of circumstance, bound together by a shared understanding of what it meant to finally live for oneself. Eleanor found herself talking more freely than she had in years. She told them about her past life as a designer and her dreams of traveling. She didn't mention her children's success or their rejection. That story felt like it belonged to a different person. These women saw her as a fresh canvas, a new friend with an open heart. Over the next few weeks, Aliner's life began to fill with new routines and new people. She spent her mornings painting, her afternoons exploring the city, and her evenings with her new friends. They were planning a trip together, a short weekend getaway to a nearby lake house. It was a simple plan, but for Aliner, it felt monumental. It was the first trip she was taking for herself, with people who wanted her company for no reason other than the joy of it. Her phone still buzzed with messages from her children. She would occasionally glance at them, a small, detached smile on her face. Ava's texts were full of questions about her mental health. Olivia's were about her financial planning. Ethan's were threats of legal action. They were all still operating under the assumption that they were in control, pulling her strings from a distance, but they couldn't see what was happening. They couldn't see the new life she was building, the new friends she had made, or the new woman she was becoming. They couldn't see that they were no longer the main characters in her story. They were just a footnote, a fading memory of a past she was happily leaving behind. She was no longer their mother. She was Aliner, a woman who had found her own purpose, her own joy, and her own family. And she was no longer alone. Aliner's peaceful new life was a world away from the storm brewing in her children's lives. Ethan had hired a lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Arthur Reed, known for his aggressive handling of elder care and estate cases. Olivia had been digging through her mother's old social media, twisting her heartfelt posts about finding purpose into evidence of an erratic state of mind. Ava, though still hesitant, had been relaying every detail her mother shared, no matter how mundane. To her siblings, they were all convinced they were the heroes of this story, saving their mother from herself. The first volley in their legal war came in the form of a certified letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, a stiff, formal document that smelled of cold intent. Aliner opened it with a detached curiosity. It was from Arthur Reed, the lawyer Ethan had hired. The letter was a thinly veiled threat, a formal request for an open dialogue about her financial affairs and a mental health assessment to ensure she was of sound mind. It also contained a veiled warning about the legal consequences of irresponsible asset liquidation. Aliner felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but it quickly faded. This wasn't her children's love or her children's anger. It was a lawyer's cold strategy. She was a case number, a problem to be solved. They had chosen to use the law as their weapon, a language she didn't speak. But she had a different kind of support now. Her friend Sarah, the sensible, strong-willed widow, saw the letter and her face hardened. "This is a full-on attack, Aliner. They're trying to prove you're incompetent. You need a lawyer, and you need one now." Sarah introduced her to a lawyer named Clara Ramirez, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for defending the vulnerable. Clara listened to Aliner's story with a quiet intensity, her eyes never leaving her face. Aliner told her about the birthday dinner, the cold conversations with her children, and her new life. She even showed her the wire transfer receipt from Ethan. "They're using the same playbook, aren't they?" Clara said, a grim smile on her lips. "This is classic. The family pretends to be concerned, but they're really just afraid of losing control of the money. They'll try to use your recent life changes, selling your house, taking classes, as evidence of instability. We'll have to get ahead of that." Clara's strategy was simple and brilliant. She would not only defend Aliner's mental capacity, but also expose the true motives of her children. They would use her children's own words and actions against them. The texts, the emails, the wire transfer, it was all evidence. The very tools they had used to keep her at a distance would now be used to expose their greed. Aliner's phone rang with a call from Ethan. She answered, a new sense of calm in her voice. "Hello, Ethan. "Mom, what is this about a lawyer?" he demanded, his voice tight with frustration. "You're hiring a lawyer? Are you serious? This is completely unnecessary. We can work this out." "We can't, Ethan," Alina replied calmly. "You made this a legal matter when you sent me that letter. You had your chance to talk, but you chose to hire a lawyer instead. So now my lawyer will talk to yours." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. He had thought he could intimidate her into submission, but he was meeting a resolve he had never seen before. "Mom, please, we're just trying to look out for you," he stammered. "No," Alina said, her voice firm and unwavering. "You're trying to look out for yourselves, and I will not let you take my life from me. Goodbye, Ethan." She hung up the phone, a small, triumphant smile on her face. Her life was no longer a stage for her children's drama. It was a battlefield, and she had just won the first skirmish. The pain was still there, but now it was a hardened weapon, a shield of resolve that would protect her from the children she had once given everything to, but who now wanted to take it all away. The fight for her freedom had officially begun. Alina's legal battle was a testament to her newfound resolve. With Clara Ramirez by her side, she felt more prepared than she ever had in her life. The court date was set, a day that would decide not just her financial future, but her freedom. The day arrived with a cold, gray sky mirroring the somber atmosphere of the courtroom. Ethan, Olivia, and Ava sat on one side, a picture of polished, professional success. Their lawyer, Arthur Reed, was a master of passive aggression, his every movement a calculated performance of concern. On the other side sat Alina and Clara. Alina was dressed simply, not to gain sympathy, but to be herself. Arthur Reed began his argument with a smooth, practiced voice, painting a portrait of Alina as a vulnerable, elderly woman. He spoke of her erratic behavior, her impulsive decisions to sell her home, and her risky travel plans. He presented Ava's texts and Olivia's notes as evidence of a family's desperate attempt to protect their mother from herself. He ended his speech by stating, "This isn't about money. This is about a family's love. It is about a son and his daughters trying to ensure their mother's safety and well-being. We ask the court to appoint a conservator to manage Mrs. Carter's affairs for her own good." Alina watched her children as he spoke, their faces a mixture of self-righteousness and anxiety. They truly believed they were doing the right thing. They had convinced themselves that their actions were a form of love, a twisted kind of responsibility. Then it was Clara's turn. She walked to the stand and began her own quiet, methodical dismantling of their case. She didn't use flowery language or emotional pleas. She used facts. She presented the wire transfer from Ethan, a cold, hard sum of money sent as a replacement for his presence. She read from Olivia's emails, detailing her demanding work schedule and her dismissal of her mother's loneliness. She used a transcript of a recorded phone call where Ava admitted to her mother's irresponsible spending, revealing the true fear was of losing an inheritance. "This is not a case about a family's love." Clara's voice was calm and steady. "This is a case about a family's expectations. Mrs. Carter spent her life building a foundation for her children, sacrificing her own career and dreams. She fulfilled her part of the unspoken contract. But when her children grew up, they chose to see her not as a person, but as a resource. An ATM. When she stopped giving, they chose not to reconnect, but to control. They used money as a substitute for affection and a weapon to control her life. Then Clara turned to Alina. "Mrs. Carter, the court would like to hear from you." Alina rose and walked to the stand. The room went silent. She looked at her children, their faces now pale, their confident masks beginning to crack. For a moment, she saw the little boy who needed help with his science project, the little girl who built sandcastles, and the little girl who painted a queen with a crown of light. but the image faded, replaced by the cold, distant adults they had become. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong. "They are right about one thing. This is about a kind of debt. For years, I gave everything I had. I was a mother, and that was my purpose. I didn't ask for anything in return because a mother's love isn't a transaction. But when they grew up, they gave me money and told me I was on my own. They told me my life could no longer be about them, and in a way, they were right." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "I am not incompetent. I am not a victim. I am a woman who finally, for the first time in my life, has the chance to be myself. They call my decisions erratic, but I call them freedom. They want to put me under a conservatorship to manage my life, but I'm asking you to protect it. I'm asking you to let me live the life I was supposed to have, a life I sacrificed for them." She looked directly at her children. "I love you. I will always love you, but I can no longer be the woman you need me to be. I have to be the woman I was meant to be." The courtroom was silent. Her words were not an emotional plea, but a powerful statement of truth. The judge, an older man who had seen countless family disputes, looked at the evidence before him. He saw the cold numbers, the transactional emails, and the stark contrast between Aline's genuine, heartbreaking speech and her children's calculated maneuvering. After a brief recess, he returned with a verdict. "The court finds no evidence of Mrs. Carter's mental incompetence. She is not a danger to herself. The actions of the plaintiffs, while presented as concern, appear to be a clear attempt to control their mother's life and assets for their own gain. The request for conservatorship is denied." A small gasp escaped Aline's lips. Her body, which had been coiled with tension for months, finally relaxed. Her children sat in stunned silence, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. They had lost, not just the money, but the one person who had loved them unconditionally. Aline had won. Aline's verdict was not just a legal victory, it was a profound emotional release. As the judge read the final words, a wave of relief washed over her, a feeling so pure and powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She had fought for her freedom, and she had won. Her children, however, sat stunned. The defeat was not just in court, but in their own minds. Their carefully constructed narrative had been exposed for what it truly was, a thinly veiled attempt at control driven by greed. They had lost everything they were fighting for, and in the process, they had lost their mother. Aline rose from her seat, a new kind of confidence in her posture. She walked out of the courtroom with Clara by her side, leaving her children to sit with their defeat. They did not try to stop her. They had nothing left to say. The debt, it seemed, was finally settled. Over the next few weeks, Aline moved with a newfound energy. She sold her house, but this time it was a celebratory act, not a painful one. The closing felt like a fresh start, a final farewell to the old life and the old self. She gave away much of the furniture, keeping only a few cherished items from her past, a small reminder of where she came from. The rest she sold, her mind already on her next adventure. With her passport in hand and a single suitcase packed, Aline headed to the airport. Her children called, but she didn't answer. Their calls were not apologies, but a series of desperate attempts to salvage their reputation and their inheritance. Ethan called to say they would drop the case if she would just agree to a financial plan. Olivia called to say she was worried and that this was all a big misunderstanding. Ava left a tearful voicemail, begging her not to leave, but Aline knew these pleas were not for her, they were for themselves. She finally answered a call from Ava just before boarding her plane. "I'm about to get on a flight, honey," Aline said softly. "Mom, please don't do this," Ava sobbed. "Come home, we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Ava," Aline said, a finality in her voice that had not been there before. "I've already forgiven you, but you have to live with your choices. You chose money and status over me, and now you have to face the consequences." Elinor hung up the phone. She had no anger left, only a deep and abiding sadness for the children she had lost. But the sadness no longer controlled her. It was a part of her past, not her future. She looked at her boarding pass, the name Elinor Carter printed neatly on the ticket to Paris. She wasn't Mom anymore. She was Elinor. As she stepped onto the plane, she felt a sense of liberation so profound it almost took her breath away. She had paid her debt, a lifetime of love and sacrifice. And now she was finally going to live. The unspoken debt had been a heavy burden, a story of love, loss, and the hard-won freedom to finally be oneself. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love we can give is the one we give to ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope Elinor's story reminds you to cherish the ones you love and to never forget the sacrifices that bind us together. On behalf of the entire Family Revenge Secrets team, we wish you good health and a lifetime of happiness with your family.